Tuscaloosa News sports columnist, sports editor Cecil Hurts. Cecil, how are you today?
Great, Aaron. How are you feeling?
I've been better, but just curious on your immediate thoughts. I don't want to ask you to read another man's psyche, but what did you take out of Nick Saban's press conference today? It sounded like he's a guy that maybe realizes his team is talented, but maybe has not yet full reached its potential or being consistent at all.
Yeah, I think he's kind of glad to have that Ole Miss game behind him, sort of get that monkey off his back from the last couple of years. But realizes that left a lot of points on the table offensively, had some busts that really cost them defensively. There wasn't a phase of the game where they played perfectly. They made big plays in every phase of the game, and you like big plays, but I think he probably puts consistency over big plays if he had to rank them, and he'd like to see a little more consistency.
Speaking with Cecil Hurt, the Tuscaloosa News sports columnist and sports editor. Cecil, what did you see out of that kind of revamped offensive line? I know they did rush the ball. I guess the most meaningful series is when you have a 5-point lead and you're trying to milk the clock. They were able to run the ball when they needed to. What did you see from that, and is it progress?
I thought they played better. Nick made a point of saying that they played better than they had played in the first two games. I think they still have some ground that they need to cover, some things that they need to do better. But I don't think he was displeased. I think it's just a matter of a little more experience. I don't think it's that Lester Cotton can't play that guard position. I just think that Ross is more comfortable at that guard position. And Taylor has a lot of experience. These guys started a lot of big games. And so I thought it was better. I thought they wore Ole Miss down over the course of the game. As you say, by the end of the game, they pretty well had control of the line of scrimmage. So I thought it was an improvement over the first 2 weeks.
What did you make of Jalen's performance? The one thing that stuck with me, and I think it was important, Nick Saban mentioned it during this press conference that just recently wrapped up, the fact that nothing really seems to bother this kid. Down 24-3 on the road, this absolutely got destroyed. Sack, scoop, fumble, and return for a touchdown. Nothing really seems to bother him that much.
No, he's very poised. I think that's one of the real attributes, probably the first attribute I would list. That's not in any way to downplay his athletic ability, but I think what you come away with first in watching him play is a recognition of how poised he is. Got hit in the jaw on a play, gave up a fumble for a touchdown, came back and came right back out on the field and didn't have any problems with it. So, led the team on a 50-yard touchdown drive when they had to have one. And I think that's the kind of thing that makes him a leader to his teammates and is probably, again, not downplaying the touchdown passes, not downplaying the 140 yards rushing, 140 plus. Just saying that he's poised, doesn't get rattled, and I think that's one thing that they really like about him.
Granted, my memory isn't the best, but is it odd at all? Practice canceled today, or not really canceled, but they're going to do some stretching and walkthroughs in meetings. But after 3 weeks, that he feels that maybe this team needs a little bit of a break.
I don't think it's unprecedented. I think that if you look at when the open week is between Tennessee and LSU, this is a good time just to give them a day, let them get their legs back under them. That was a physical game on top of everything else. Physical game Saturday. A lot of guys were out. A lot of guys were bumped and bruised afterwards. Of course, a lot of guys had cramps, but also just a lot of guys with some nagging things. And so I think it comes at a good time for them.
Speaking with Cecil Hurt, the longtime Tuscaloosa News columnist and sports editor, what did you make of the defensive effort? I mean, this is an Ole Miss offense that seems to give Alabama's defense troubles over the last few years, and I thought many of us thought this may have been the Alabama defense most equipped to combat it. And before you know it, they're throwing points up on the board. I guess each game and each play is a life in its own, but it seems to be a trend now that Ole Miss has at least figured out most of what Alabama's throwing at them.
Well, I think that in today's age, when you've got a hot quarterback, and Chad Kelly was hot, and he was fearless. He would put the ball up. And they have recruited, they have a philosophy to recruit big, strong receivers. And if he can get the ball into an area where they can just outfight a defensive back. Now, you have to find the one-on-one. You have to make the right read. I'm not saying it's just a chuck and duck back there, which it's not. But he made good throws, accurate throws. Their offensive line didn't protect him perfectly, but and he certainly took some shots when he would decide to tuck the ball and run. There was a blown coverage, obviously, that led to a long touchdown by Evan Ingram. I think the two late touchdowns, you really got to recognize that in that stretch, you've got your defensive signal caller, Reuben Foster's off the field. Eddie Jackson's off the field. Minka Fitzpatrick's off the field. So you're playing with freshmen. And Nick said today at the press conference there were some things that they didn't want to call. Ole Miss obviously an empty, given the score and time situation. And there were some things, some defenses they just didn't want to call against empty because they weren't sure with two freshmen in the secondary, with Reuben not in to call signals at linebacker. There were some things, some defensive formations that he just wasn't sure that they could execute. That these guys just hadn't, they practiced them. There's a big difference in going through them a few times at practice and going against an SEC offense, particularly one that's clicking pretty well. So they were a little bit vanilla in that situation, not because they didn't recognize what was going on, but because three key experienced guys, including two in the secondary, when they're in dime, were out, couldn't play. Were not injured, but were sidelined by cramps and so forth. So I thought that was a factor. I thought during the stretch when Alabama was coming back, remember they went on a 45-6 run, and the 6 is pretty impressive, as is the 45. So I thought they got some stops. The goal line stand was big for them, and so I never thought that they were out of control. I never thought that they were getting dominated at the line of scrimmage. But Kelly made some plays. They had some guys leave the field, and it affected them. It sure did. The one thing I will say, I don't think, certainly in the 7 SEC games that they have left, unless somebody really develops between now and then, they're not going to see another quarterback like Chad Kelly. They're not going to see a guy that's going to be able to hang in there and make those throws to that kind of receiver. Now, they'll see different offenses that'll be good, Arkansas and LSU. Trevor Knight would be the closest one, and they've certainly seen him go off before. But for the rest of the games, they really don't face a quarterback like that.
Cecil, I know we're only 3 games in. I'm not going to make any bold proclamations, but in watching the SEC this year, I mean, do we have a clear understanding of at least right now, who's the second best team in this league is?
No, but I think after this weekend, we'll see who wins that Arkansas-Texas A&M. It could very well be Texas A&M. LSU-Auburn is a big game. I think that the quarterback situation, where they're not looking for a great quarterback. Everybody thinks that the Purdue transfer is coming in and being a great quarterback. That's not the point. It's looking for a game manager, got to turn it over and do that sort of thing. But it certainly could be LSU. They're a talented team. Interesting to see how they play at Auburn. Could be Ole Miss. Anxious to see how they play against Georgia. I don't think that, I think the Tennessee-Florida game will be interesting, and Florida's very good defensively. I'm not sure I would put one of those as the number 2. If I were just ranking them today, based on what they've done and how they look, I'd have Texas A&M at 2, but really intrigued to see how they play against Arkansas.